Please be seated. I speak to you this morning in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Good morning. Well, I've had quite the week. As many of you are aware, I'm a travel agent Monday through Friday, and this week has presented me with some significant challenges. In the past, I've navigated things such as 9/11 and experienced travel through a pandemic. And this week, I can only describe the situation as a convergence of every terrible event happening simultaneously. We started with 3 significant snowstorms that ended with one massive one on Sunday. That in itself is enough to drive a travel agent mad with all the problems that the weather can cause. But then something else happened. You know, I've been doing this work for 40 years. I started when I was 5. I've booked tens of thousands of people on flights, small engine flights, helicopter flights, 13-hour flights, 1-hour flights. And I've never had a single client that has ever been in a plane crash. That was up until Monday. I did have one of my clients traveling on that Delta flight that crashed at Pearson. After the shock and panic of the crash, I had the opportunity to speak to this person, and she gave me a very detailed analysis of what happened from the moment that she arrived at the airport in Minneapolis to the entire events of the plane crash. What she told me moved my heart and gave me the opportunity to thank God for saving all those precious souls whose lives were literally turned upside down. I want you to know that my client is a lovely woman who lives a very simple life. She told me this story because she knew that I was a deacon. She asked me that if I share it, that I not use her name. She really doesn't know that I'm actually sharing it with an entire congregation this morning. Right after I spoke with her, I looked at today's gospel, and her story has such a remarkable significance to the gospel that we just heard. I want you to think about and remember a few things that we heard in today's gospel. Most importantly, these sentences: love your enemies, do good things to those that hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. Do to others as you would have them do to you. These are profound words, to say the least. I find them even more profound after I spoke to my friend, the passenger on flight 4819. You see, boarding didn't go so well in Minneapolis. The flight was full. There was a lot of people that were unhappy because they didn't get their right seat of choice. Some people were unhappy because they didn't get their first class upgrade. And I was told by her of a very angry man that was on that flight. When he boarded, he started arguing with the flight attendants because he was assigned a window seat, and he told them that he only flies in aisle seats. And he made quite a fuss at the front of the plane. They couldn't give him what he wanted because all the seats were taken. When he got to his window seat, he was seated right next to my client, who had the aisle. He then started an argument with her. Now, here is a non-confrontational woman who is sitting there minding her own business, just wanting to get home to see her family after a long business meeting. She is then confronted by this rude man who simply says to her, "You're sitting in my seat." She showed him her boarding pass, which showed that she was indeed sitting in the right seat, but he continued to argue with her, raising his voice, calling her condescending names, and he was relentless. The flight attendants had to come and sort the matter out. They explained to him that he is assigned the window seat and that my client was assigned the aisle. Eventually, she relented and told the man and the flight attendant that if it was such a big deal, that she would sit at the window and he could take the aisle. Well, that he didn't stop there. He turned to her and said, "Well, this could have all been avoided if you'd just given me the seat in the first place. No, thank you. No, that was very nice of you. Nothing." Then he proceeded to take all the space in the overhead bins and put his arm firmly on the left armrest so that she couldn't use it at all. Again, she said nothing as he treated her as though he hated her. During the flight attendants came around to offer refreshments, and my client asked for a Diet Coke, at which point the grumpy man replied, "I hope you have 2 of those because I want one too." Well, as predictably as possible, the flight attendant advised them that she was down to her last Diet Coke, and the grumpy old man grabbed the Coke out of her hand and said, "That's for me because I'm a Delta Gold Medallion member and I take priority." And again, she relented and said nothing. She allowed the man to have the last Diet Coke, and she asked for something else. For the rest of the flight, he was grumpy to the flight attendants, complaining about the delay, that he shouldn't have gone on standby, that he should have got his aisle seat right away, that he should have got upgraded to first class. And he also made a comment about how people who travel should leave their kids at home. He was just one of those people who wanted you really to dislike him, loud and obnoxious. When the flight touched down, as most of us have seen on the video, it rolled over and crashed, leaving everyone upside down, strapped in their seatbelts. My client was released from her seat, and when she became undone, she ended up 3 rows behind her and bumped her head. The grumpy man was stuck in his seat, upside down. He couldn't get his seatbelt off because he couldn't reach the clasp. At that point, my client had 2 choices. She was already thrown 3 rows back. She could have simply evacuated the plane, but she didn't. She made the other choice, the choice of doing good to those that hate you, the choice of praying for those that abuse you, to give to everyone who begs from you. She crawled back to the man, and she unclipped his seatbelt and released him from hanging upside down. She saved him. Now, I'm not saying that he would have died if it weren't for her. What I am saying is that after all of the abuse this man had inflicted on her for 2 hours, she chose not to save herself first, but to go back and release the man from his seat. You would think this man would have been grateful, and he was not. He pushed her out of the way and tried to get off the plane first, as hard as possible, and he didn't even speak to my client once they were off the plane and didn't even thank her. When my client told me of this story, I wondered if she had read today's gospel or if she was a religious woman at all. She told me that she was not that religious, that she was an Easter and Christmas Christian. She just couldn't leave the man on the plane knowing that she had left another human being stuck upside down in their seat. She doesn't want to be known as a hero, and she doesn't want to receive any medals. And as I said before, she doesn't even want her name to be known or get any media attention. She simply was acting as any other person would. I had to give that a good long thought. Would I have gone back to release that miserable man? I think I would have. What would you have done? I know that all of us would have a quick thought of maybe just letting him hanging there. But deep inside of us, as followers of Jesus, we're all taught to love, not to hate. We have to love this man, despite everything he had said and everything he had done. Again, we have to remember, do to others as you would have them do to you. My client has since told me that she thinks that she had an angel or a higher power watching over her that icy afternoon last week. She thanks God for saving her life and the lives of everyone else on the plane. What else does that plane crash teach us? It teaches us that we never know when we'll be called upon to help somebody else. We should always be prepared to help those in need, be it the unhoused, the sick, the lonely, and even grumpy old men hanging upside down. We can't judge anyone. This incident also reminds us to thank God for every moment that he has given us here on earth, to treasure those moments, to love deeper, to worship more, to deepen our relationships, to take a moment to thank him for everything that he has created for us. We live in an ever-changing world. If you had told me 2 weeks ago that all of these events would have happened, I would have never believed you that all of these things would have happened at once. What scares me about what happened is not the plane crash itself, because I can tell you that flying is by far the most safest way to travel, but it's people's reactions to the situation. Today, when people are put in these types of situations, be it snowstorms or canceled flights or stuck on tarmacs for 6 hours, they lose their sense of reason, and people really do start to become unreasonable. All of this week, I've had to work with so many unreasonable people. 99% of those people do not know that I'm an ordained person and a devout follower of Jesus. I've been personally attacked and abused over the phone, by text, by email, and even by FaceTime about things that are far beyond my control. A man called me on Tuesday, the day after the crash, to advise me that his flight to Calgary was delayed by 6 hours. He was cursing at me using foul language, but I kept my cool, and I remembered to do to others as you would have done to them. He was very concerned that his private helicopter transfer that he booked to go to Banff would leave without him because of the delay of his flight. He said to me, "I'm assuming you'll be covering all the costs of any of the penalties I incur because of my missed helicopter charter." Well, I had to close my eyes, take a very deep breath, and speak to him in the most calming and reasonable voice possible. I said to him, "I'm sorry about what you're going through, and this must be very difficult for you. However, you see, I didn't cause the 60 centimeters of snow that fell on Toronto, and I didn't cause that Delta plane to crash and block 2 runways." The more he raised his voice to me, the more I replied in a calm and sane manner. Eventually, after 30 minutes of us going back and forth, with him verbally abusing me and me replying with kindness and sympathy, he relented, and I made a deal with him. I said, "If you stop yelling at me, I'll call your helicopter company, even though I didn't book it, and I'll see if I can get you your money back." When he heard this, his voice changed and his tone changed. I followed through on my promise, and I explained to the helicopter company what had happened, and guess what? They changed his charter to a different time, all for free, all because I went about it with kindness, and I didn't attack them. I can guarantee you that if this man had called the helicopter company himself, he would have lost all of his money. Even though this man was incredibly nasty to me, I did not judge him. I knew that his world was revolving around what was happening to him at a crowded airport with angry travelers. I remembered another part of this week's gospel. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. The events of last week's snowstorm and plane crash will remain with me for the rest of my life, just as the other travel tragedies have. However, these recent incidents made me stop to think about what I can do to make this world a better place. If we all stop and think about what a better place our world could be. I encourage everyone to be slow to judge, to be quick to love, and to do good to those you don't like. If you really follow today's gospel, you may even find yourself releasing an obnoxious man that's hanging upside down in a seat one day. God only knows, and to God be all the glory. Amen.